Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the very first Watchman Newscast live stream for 2024. We are in a new year. Happy New Year to everyone. First of all, I hope everyone had a great holiday season with their families and their loved ones. And now on January 2nd, it is full speed ahead here on the Watchman. Our team is hitting the ground running in this new year, and so is Israel. Folks, we begin 2024 with some major breaking news. Today, January 2nd, the Israel Defense Forces kicked off the new year by eliminating top Hamas leader Saleh Al-Arouri. Now, this is a very, very significant targeted strike by Israel. And by the way, let me just say up front that Israel will neither confirm nor deny this strike on Saleh Al-Arouri. Israel is staying mum, and reportedly Israeli ministers in the government have been instructed to not talk about the elimination of Saleh Al-Arouri. But folks, make no mistake about it, this is the biggest targeted assassination of a Hamas leader since October 7th, since Hamas. Key point here, folks, just a very helpful reminder as we move into the new year. Since Hamas launched this war against Israel, yes, Hamas launched the war on October 7th with an invasion of Israel where 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, were slaughtered in cold blood, and close to 300 more were carried off into captivity into Gaza. And I'm saying that, and you might be watching and saying, hey, I knew that already. But folks, that's kind of been lost in the fog of war, right? Over the past nearly 3 months since October 7th. You don't hear much anymore in the mainstream media, surprise, surprise, about what precipitated the war right now, what led to Israel invading Gaza and well on its way now to destroying this demonic death cult known as Hamas. So just a helpful reminder, and a big part of this, a big piece, Saleh Al-Arouri is dead. Now, here is what we know so far, folks. Again, Israel not confirming or denying, but Iran and Hezbollah clearly pointing the finger at Israel and Hamas already. We'll break that down as well and the aftermath of this. But here's what we have. Saleh Al-Arouri and 5 other Hamas operatives were in a third-floor apartment in the suburbs south of Beirut when they were struck, when this apartment was struck by a drone, and a major explosion there, and all 6 were killed. Now, you might be saying, hey, Hamas's main power base is in Gaza. What was Al-Arouri doing in Beirut? Well, here's the deal. In the suburbs south of Beirut lies a major Hezbollah stronghold. This is Hezbollah country, and Al-Arouri had set up shop there. He was living in Beirut. This doesn't come as a surprise, folks, for a few reasons. Number one, Al-Arouri has kind of bounced around over the past few years. He was in Turkey for a few years, more on that in a minute as well. He was then in Syria. He ended up in Beirut. But secondly, his main role in Hamas. Now, number one, deputy political leader of Hamas. And even more importantly, though, he was in charge. He was the point man for all Hamas terror operations and terror attacks in the West Bank, which we call Judea and Samaria, of course, here in the Watchman. That's a biblical heartland, but nonetheless, Al-Arouri was in charge of Hamas terror there. But when it comes to his roles, I'd say number one, the terror chief role in the West Bank, but 1A, close second, was his role as the main facilitator of the relationship, the alliance between Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah. That's the major reason he was in Beirut, folks, to facilitate and continue to grow that relationship between Hamas, Hezbollah, and the mothership in Tehran, the Iranian regime. Now, Al-Arouri met frequently with Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah and other Hezbollah leaders in Beirut. And we've reported here in the newscast over the past few months, and this was, by the way, including in the run-up, not coincidentally, in the run-up to the October 7th massacre, these terror summits taking place in Beirut. between the leaders of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and also officials from the Iranian regime meeting on a frequent basis in Beirut. Now, Al-Arouri was present at some of those meetings, and he wasn't just acting as kind of the stenographer and keeping the minutes for the meeting. No, Al-Arouri was really the major voice in Hamas in terms of wanting to have what he called the unity of fronts. What does that mean? That means Hamas forging closer ties across the Sunni-Shia divide with the likes of Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, the Houthis in Yemen, and these other Iranian-backed proxies that reside in that Iranian-backed ring of fire that surrounds Israel on all sides. We've talked about it often here on the newscast. So Al-Arouri was really the man in Hamas who was saying, hey, we need to cleave closer to Iran and Hezbollah. Of course, there's a Sunni-Shia theological difference, but that is besides the point. The main point, the main goal here that we can all agree on 100% is destroying the hated Zionist entity, as they would call it, the state of Israel. So look, people could say, well, and we've heard this even since 9/11, and talk about short-sighted and having a blindness. Sunni and Shia can't work together. Folks, this theory that the geniuses in Washington, D.C. and inside the Beltway have put forth many times over the years has been blown out of the water, no pun intended, time and time again, as we've seen, for instance, Al-Qaeda and Iran. We've seen Hamas and Iran, Hamas and Hezbollah, bridging that Sunni-Shia divide time and time again. The radical jihadists of both wings get along just fine when it comes to killing Christians and Jews and targeting Israelis, Americans, Westerners, and anyone who doesn't subscribe to their genocidal ideology. So let's just put that aside right away. That doesn't hold water. That's been proven time and time again over the past few decades. But Al-Arouri, point man for that relationship, or at least past tense. He was the point man for that relationship. He is now no more. And Hamas released a statement today, as did Hezbollah, as did the Iranian regime. Again, if you're just joining us, this strike, a major targeted strike of top Hamas leader Saleh Al-Arouri, occurred today, nighttime in the Middle East. It occurred, I'm coming to you today around 4:20 Eastern time here in the United States, but this occurred morning here in the States. It was already evening in the Middle East. In the suburbs south of Beirut, in a third-story apartment, he and 5 other top Hamas operatives were eliminated. Now, a few more specifics on who else was in the building, who was targeted in this strike. Obviously, the big fish, Saleh Al-Arouri. Again, top 5, certainly Hamas leaders, folks. He is in the top 5, the upper echelon of this movement. You could say top 3. In terms of his operational role, in that Al-Arouri, think of the most important portfolios if you are a Hamas leader. Yahya Sinwar, who's certainly the most wanted man, he's Hamas's leader in Gaza. You'll say number 1 in terms of relevance right now to the current war. Number 2, Mohammed Deif, who's been really, along with Sinwar, Israel's most wanted man for years and years. He's in charge of all Hamas military operations in Gaza. So Sinwar, Deif, 1, 2. You got to say, I would think, in terms of operation, and that's why he was targeted today, surprise, surprise, Saleh Al-Arouri. Why? We just laid it out for you a minute ago. Number 1, in charge of all physical terror operations in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. And by the way, that's a great untold story the past 3 months. Israel has eliminated many terrorists, Hamas terrorists, and arrested over 1,000 more in the West Bank. Since October 7th, frequent firefights and raids every night in places like Tulkarm in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. And Al-Arouri is the point man there. And we are hearing reports in recent days that residents of Judea and Samaria, Israelis, are very concerned that Hamas is digging tunnels there in the West Bank, beneath communities there. A lot going on. And again, Al-Arouri, point man there. So a huge, huge elimination on that front, because Hamas would like to open a second front, at least on the Palestinian. There's 6 fronts open right now, as we've discussed. You've got Gaza, you've got Lebanon, you've got Syria, you've got Yemen, you've got the West Bank, you've got Iraq, you've got Iran itself, Lebanon. So there's multiple fronts already. But Hamas, in a major way, would like to open the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. I mean, in a major, major way. A new intifada there in those territories and a major onslaught. Taking out Al-Arouri obviously puts a major crimp in those plans. That's a major setback on that level. But also, folks, look, this is an axis of evil led by the Iranian regime, the Iran-led Ring of Fire. And Al-Arouri was the point man on that relationship. And now he's not. That's big. So who else was there? Besides Al-Arouri, let me get the name straight for you. Just going to read this straight off my phone. Here we go, folks. In this strike today, in addition to Saleh Al-Arouri, one of the top 3 most significant Hamas leaders right now, or he was. And I say that also. You might say, what about Ismail Haniyeh, who's kind of the overall political leader? Someone like Musa Abu Marzouk, Khaled Mashal. Yes, political leaders, figureheads, no doubt. But again, Saleh Al-Arouri was involved on the literal military tactical end of things in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, actually directing actual terror attacks, as is the likes of Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, and facilitating the Iran-Hezbollah relationship. His elimination, to me, is more important than if Israel right now had eliminated Ismail Haniyeh, who's the top overall leader of Hamas. But here we go. Senior Hamas military officials Samir Findi and Azam al-Aqra have been identified among the 5, I've heard 6, killed. Okay, among the 5, yes, 6 overall. They were killed along with Saleh Al-Arouri in an alleged Israeli airstrike on an apartment building in the Beirut suburb of Dahiya, Arabic media from the region reports. So those are some of the other names here. Another reason to target Al-Arouri, as we break this down. Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu, even before the Thanksgiving holiday, I believe it was November 22nd, said no Hamas leader is safe around the world. We will target them around the world. He said, I've put out notice to Mossad, Israel's spy agency, that all Hamas leaders, basically their lives are on the table. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, said shortly thereafter that every Hamas leader, and essentially every member, but certainly leaders, are, quote, dead men walking. We know that Israel's been searching for Sinwar and Mohammed Deif and these other Hamas leaders in Gaza in that elaborate tunnel network beneath Khan Yunis. But you said, okay, how are they going to target Hamas leaders if you've got a few of them in tunnels dug in under the ground in Gaza? Eventually they'll find them, God willing. But what about these more, suit wearing, sports coat wearing Hamas leaders? And folks, you've seen them. They're billionaires. I don't know what Al-Arouri's bank account was, but Khaled Mashal, Ismail Haniyeh, Musa Abu Marzouk, those 3 are billionaires. I wonder where the money came from. Call me crazy, but perhaps the money came from, I don't know, those billions and billions of dollars of international aid that have flowed into Gaza over the past few decades. I know that's crazy talk. I'm sure they're just honest businessmen who accumulated all that wealth through their own hard work and ingenuity, or not. They pocketed, just as Yasser Arafat did years ago, they pocketed billions of dollars in international aid and built beautiful villas and reside in Qatar, living lavishly, flying private jets around the world, dining at the finest restaurants in the Middle East. But they're tougher targets, harder targets, obviously, in Qatar. You think of Ismail Haniyeh, the overall leader, Khaled Mashal, the former leader, Musa Abu Marzouk, one of the top leaders, who, by the way, resided in the United States for a time. He lived in Virginia. Side note there, something we should expand on at length in the future here on the newscast. But why is Qatar more problematic? Look, right now, Qatar is in the middle of hostage negotiations. The U.S. is heaping praise upon Qatar, misguided praise, and that's an understatement. They have been a state sponsor of Hamas. But for various reasons, it's a little trickier right now for Israel to eliminate top Hamas leaders on Qatari soil. In the future, after the dust settles in Gaza, maybe not as much. But for now, it's tricky, and that's an understatement. But Lebanon's a different story. Lebanon right now is an active war front. Qatar is not. But Lebanon right now, Israel and Hezbollah are in a state of war right now. It's been called a low-intensity war. Call it what you want to call it. But literally every day, Israel and Hezbollah are going toe-to-toe along the Israel-Lebanon border, and they have been since October 8th. Saleh Al-Arouri was residing, based in a war front, in Hezbollah land, in the suburbs south of Beirut. Israel's already at war with Hezbollah. A larger northern war, as we've discussed many times here in the newscast, is coming against Hezbollah, perhaps now sooner than later. You can even maybe speed up the timetable after today's killing of Al-Arouri. But Al-Arouri was operating inside of an active front in this war. So a bit, I don't want to say easier for Israel to target him, but Israel didn't have the same considerations that it would have if it carried out strikes in Qatar. So now what? Al-Arouri is gone. And by the way, just his trajectory over the years, he was released from prison, I believe in 2010, 2011. He actually was born in the West Bank. Many of these top Hamas leaders were born in Gaza. He was born in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. So it made sense that he was the point man on the terror operations there. But he was in prison. He was released as part of the Gilad Shalit prisoner swap 2011, as was Yahya Sinwar, and over 1,000 more Palestinian Hamas terrorists and assorted terror operatives released in exchange for Gilad Shalit over a decade ago. As I said, he took up residence in Turkey, a NATO member, Turkey. Under the radical rule of Recep Erdogan, I've referred to Turkey as NINO, NATO in name only. And a chief reason for that is Erdogan's active support and praise for Hamas and sheltering Saleh Al-Arouri on Turkish soil, where he conducted attacks. He masterminded attacks from Turkey, including the 2014 kidnapping of 3 Israeli teenagers by Hamas. They were murdered by Hamas, and that precipitated a major war between Israel and Hamas that stretched throughout the summer of 2014. If you recall, that was nearly a decade ago. Hard to believe. Now we're in 2024. This was 2014. So Saleh Al-Arouri, certainly his terror profile raised then, and he's been one of the most wanted men since that abduction back in 2014. And again, those 3 Israeli teenagers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas, and that sparked the war. And obviously after October 7th, where, by the way, there's footage from October 7th. You can find it on X, formerly known as Twitter, and elsewhere, of Saleh Al-Arouri, Ismail Haniyeh, Khaled Mashal, watching live streaming footage of the massacre, live streamed by Hamas, praising it and lying prostrate on the ground and praising Allah and praying. That's the kind of guy Saleh Al-Arouri was, needless to say. So, okay, now what? Reactions. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime. Number one, I wouldn't be surprised to hear some condemnations of this from Turkey. Al-Arouri was evicted from Turkey only because, as we documented here in the newscast, Erdogan, for a time at least until October 7th, was engaged in a charm offensive with Israel and trying to kind of mend fences with Israel. Why? Because Turkey's economy is a shambles right now. Inflation is through the roof. Erdogan was looking for help wherever he could get it. That's out the window now, obviously, since October 7th, as he's gone full on supporting Hamas like he always has. But will Turkey condemn Al-Arouri's death? That will be interesting to see, especially coming from a NATO member. Hamas began the new year yesterday with a barrage at central and southern Israel, at least 20 rockets, maybe more. But it's unclear how much Hamas has in its arsenal right now left, folks. Does Hamas have the bandwidth right now for a major retaliation, a revenge for Saleh Al-Arouri? Look, Hamas right now, as we begin the new year, is on the ropes. Largely decimated in northern Gaza, still pockets of some fierce resistance, but the IDF has largely destroyed Hamas in Gaza and around Gaza City, to the point where some Israeli soldiers in the north are now leaving. The fierce fighting right now, central and southern Gaza, in particular, continuing around Khan Yunis in the south, the second largest city in Gaza. We've seen, and I get the alerts on my phone, we've seen less and less of the alerts every day alerting us that rockets have come into Israel from Gaza. Now, at the beginning of this war, there were constant alerts. Rockets were being launched on a regular basis. Now that Hamas has taken major, major losses across the board, including its rocket launching capabilities, I'll tell you, on my phone, I'm getting less and less of those alerts. I mean, they're a trickle now coming out of Gaza. What I am getting more of, though, on my phone are alerts from the north, and rockets and drones and anti-tank missiles being launched by Hezbollah, which brings us to the most likely response in the wake of Al-Arouri's death. Look, Hezbollah has vowed throughout this conflict since October 7th that if any Hamas leader, operative, etc., was eliminated on Lebanese soil under Hezbollah's noses, then Hezbollah would have a forceful response. Well, here we go. Right now, Israel is on high alert in anticipation of that possible Hezbollah response. Nasrallah has warned about this and threatened about this over the months. Now it's here. Israel eliminated one of the top 3 Hamas leaders on Lebanese soil in the suburbs around Beirut, which is in addition to southern Lebanon, this is the Hezbollah stronghold. Again, right under Hezbollah's nose as this drone strike occurred earlier today. How does Hezbollah respond? Now, Nasrallah has held back from a full-on response since October 7th, basically because he doesn't want Hezbollah to be completely destroyed, nor does the Iranian regime. Iran continues to hold Hezbollah in reserve, I believe, for the day when Iran is either going to announce it's gone nuclear, or much, much, much more likely, the day that Israel strikes Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, then Iran unleashes Hezbollah in response. So again, the Iranian regime has been holding its most lethal proxy, Hezbollah, in reserve for that day, I believe. So what does Nasrallah want to do here? He's been threading the needle over the past few weeks, past few months now. It's been almost 3 months since the October 7th massacre. Hard to believe. But Nasrallah, again, we mentioned earlier today, low intensity, but intense. And it's coming to a high intensity head in the north, where Israel and Hezbollah will wage a major war. I don't see how we avoid it in 2024. I pray for peace this year, but I also know that deterrence will not work with Hezbollah in the long run. Clearly, it didn't work with Hamas. That was exposed, that strategy, on October 7th. And you can't have bloodthirsty, genocidal, Nazi Hezbollah terrorists on your border any longer. Certainly not in the wake of October 7th, because they want to duplicate what Hamas carried out on October 7th. And by the way, one commenter I just saw, we've got a very lively chat. Welcome, everyone from around the world. We've got thousands with us watching right now. Welcome. Happy New Year. If you're just joining us, sorry I didn't give you a shout out earlier. We got right into this breaking news, the elimination of top Hamas leader Saleh Al-Arouri. But someone just commented or asked, he said, hey, Amir Sarfati, our good friend Amir from Behold Israel, who, by the way, Amir was with us just last Thursday here on the news channel. If you missed it, if you missed any of our live streams, our newscast, just go to the homepage right under newscast. You can find them all right there. And again, that was Thursday. Oh gosh, what was the date? Was that December 29th? We were with our dear friend Amir Sarfati. So check that out. But Amir observed today, or he shared about the elaborate Hezbollah tunnel network beneath the Israel-Lebanon border, which some believe dwarfs the Hamas network. Now, I can speak pretty authoritatively on this point, folks, because if you watch the newscast on a regular basis, you know I've been in one of those tunnels along the Israel-Lebanon border. I went deep inside a Hezbollah terror tunnel with the Israel Defense Forces a little while back, and this would really be a perfect opportunity to re-air parts of that segment. That entire show we filmed underground in the bowels of hell, in near too close to the bowels of hell. You can almost feel the heat in a Hezbollah tunnel with the IDF. So yes, to answer your question, commenter, whoever that was, yes, another major concern here is that Hezbollah terror network. And if Hezbollah wants to mount an October 7th style attack, raiding across the border from Lebanon, then this tunnel network could factor in. Now, the IDF in January 2019, December 2018, uncovered some 7 Hezbollah tunnels. But folks, you have to believe there are many, many more that Hezbollah has dug, stretching reportedly perhaps all the way to Beirut. Now, I mentioned the Amir newscast. Any newscast you'd like to see, check them out on the homepage, number one. Number two, be sure to subscribe. Folks, as we start the new year, we are at 860,000 subscribers. Hard to believe, man, 2023 was a big year for the channel. We gained, I believe, over 300,000 subscribers this past year alone, 2023. Not because of anything great or glorious we're doing. No, this channel is by God and for God. We're doing it all for the glory of the Lord. Yes, if you're just joining us, this is hard news from a biblical perspective, unapologetically. And when you subscribe, it's not for our glory or our edification. It's to get the message out there. We want people around the world to hear this message of truth, of moral clarity for such a time as this. Times when good is called evil, evil is called good, Bible times, prophetic times. That's why we want this message to go around the world. So the more you can subscribe and click the thumbs up button, the more that helps our cause for such a time as this. We believe it's a righteous cause, the cause of the Lord your God. So that's what we're doing here on the channel. Speaking of which, I want to break down a bit before we go. Number one, I think Israel right now, I don't want to say holding their breath. There's no fear, but Israel's awaiting the Hezbollah response. And Hezbollah's threatening rockets on Tel Aviv and Haifa now. We shall see. And I'm sure we'll have much more to report on tomorrow's live stream. But I want to talk about the Red Sea and an Iranian warship now entering the Red Sea as a U.S. aircraft carrier exits the region. We want to talk about that, the significance of that. But real quick, we're talking about the communities in northern Israel. Look, some 80,000 Israelis have been evacuated from the Israel-Lebanon border. Well over 100,000 have been evacuated from the southern border along Gaza. And folks, Mayor Panim, our good friends, we've talked about him frequently here in the newscast, they are stepping into the breach here, and they are stepping up, and they are literally doing God's work on the ground, helping these beleaguered communities in the north, in the south, providing them with hot meals, humanitarian assistance, all forms of assistance for these just incredible, brave families who are right now homeless. Look, they are living in shelters. They are living in hotels. Kids are not in school right now. Every day is a big question mark when they wake up. They don't know where they're going to lay their head that night. And they don't know when they're going to return to their homes in the south and in the north. Maybe no time soon. What I'm saying to you is this. Israel right now is having a major, major struggle as 2024 dawns. There's economic ramifications of all these evacuated folks and workers in the workforce who can't work, hundreds of thousands called up into the reserves. Israel's a tiny country of 9 million people, 7 million Jews. Everyone's on war footing right now. It's a nation turned upside down since October 7th. Mayor Panim, again, check them out at mpgive.org, is stepping into the breach and stepping up. I think of the biblical mandate laid out in Genesis 12:3 to bless the people of Israel. For me, as a follower of Jesus, that's non-negotiable. And I want to support organizations that are doing God's work, that are enabling me to bless the people of Israel. I've done it with Mayor Panim on the ground, shoulder to shoulder. I have served meals to Holocaust survivors in Israel at one of Mayor Panim's incredible soup kitchens. Folks are doing that and much more. This is an organization I strongly believe in as you kick off 2024 and you're looking for ways to support Israel right now. Hey, you can tell who your real friends are in times of trouble. If you really want to support the state of Israel right now, and a lot of people are asking me in the comments, what can I do? What can I do? I'm over here in America. I'm in London. I'm in Africa. What can I do? I recommend you check out and support Mayor Panim, mpgive.org. So check them out. Before we want to go, or before we don't want to go, I promise, but before we have to go, I did want to discuss what's happening in the Red Sea right now. Now, we've been talking a bunch over the weeks about one of the fronts in that ring of fire, one of the rings, the Houthi ring. You've got the three H's, right? Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, which are Iran's three main proxies. Well, the Houthis in Yemen have stirred up a hornet's nest over the past few months, attacking shipping, hijacking shipping, launching rockets, missiles, drones in the direction of Israel, launching rockets at U.S. destroyers in the Red Sea, to the point where the U.S. finally has organized this maritime coalition in the Red Sea against the Houthis, ostensibly to protect shipping. Now, we have companies like Maersk and BP in the past few weeks have kind of pulled out of the Red Sea and said, hey, we're not going to send our vessels through the Red Sea, too dangerous right now. A good chunk of the world's commerce, I believe 12% on a daily basis, flows through the Red Sea. Oil, you guessed it, folks, you name it. And if you think what happens in the Middle East doesn't affect you, take a look at the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait right now, and what's going on there, and how the Houthis have shut things down or tried to shut things down there. So it will affect you every time you go to pump the gas and fill up your car in 2024, if this continues. And that's a big question, if. Now, the U.S. Eliminated 3 Houthi attack boats over the weekend. But at the same time, a major U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, is now leaving the Middle East, and it's heading back to port in Virginia. Now, it had been there since October 7th off the coast of Israel as a deterrent to Hezbollah and to Iran, basically saying, don't you dare get involved because we've got assets here. But now that aircraft carrier is leaving, that U.S. aircraft carrier. And at the same time, is the timing coincidence? I'm not sure. We have an Iranian warship. Let me get some specifics for you here. Rolling on in to the Red Sea. By the way, that was the U.S. Navy's largest aircraft carrier that just left the Middle East. Does Iran say, they're cutting and running, just like they always do? That's Iran's philosophy on this. But here's what we have. Iran dispatched a warship to the Red Sea today, Monday, January 2nd, after the U.S. Navy destroyed 3 Houthi attack boats over the weekend. It's a move that risks ratcheting up tensions and complicates Washington's goal of securing a waterway that's vital to global trade, according to Bloomberg News. Now, Iran's Al-Borz destroyer traversed the Bab el-Mandeb. I mangled it earlier. I know, I apologize. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, I've said it many times, but it's a tongue twister. It traversed the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow choke point between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, on Monday. Iranian state media said, without providing further information on the vessel's mission. Iran's foray into the Red Sea, Bloomberg reports, comes a day after the U.S. action against those Houthi boats, and it could compound a highly volatile situation in that waterway, which handles about 12% of the world's commerce. So, folks, what do you think? Clearly a flex by the Iranian regime in the aftermath of this strike on the Houthis. And to me, we've said this, I'm astounded. We've said this from the beginning here in the newscast. Once the Houthis started stirring things up, I've been absolutely astounded that this has been permitted to continue. That the U.S., well, maybe I shouldn't be under the current leadership in Washington, D.C., sadly, but to allow the Houthis to essentially shut down one of the world's most important waterways to the point where BP and Maersk were saying, we're not going to use the Red Sea. And the U.S., which has destroyers there, is not doing anything about it, not sending a message to the Houthis. I'm not talking about an invasion of Yemen, where the Houthis are based. It's not what I'm talking about. But is there no possibility of targeted strikes against the Houthis along that coastline? Or is the U.S., and now there's this coalition, and the U.S. finally flexed a bit of muscle over the weekend, as I said, taking out these Houthi boats, is the U.S., which I believe sadly is the more likely scenario, the Biden administration, so concerned about offending Iran, the Houthis' masters, and expanding the war? That's all we hear from the Biden administration. We don't want to expand the war, the Gaza war. Newsflash, it's been expanded for weeks. The Hezbollah front's going to open in a major way, perhaps by the time you watch this. And the Yemen front's open. That's 3 very hot fronts to go along with Syria, another hot front, where Israel's carrying out airstrikes on a regular basis, where they eliminated Ravi Mousavi a week ago on Christmas Day, a top Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps official. What about Iraq, where these Iran-backed militias are now boasting about launching rockets in the direction of Israel, in the direction of the Golan Heights? And then you have Iran itself. So if the U.S. want to avoid a multi-front war, they're sadly mistaken. A multi-front war is upon us, is upon the U.S. And by the way, and Amir, our good friend Amir Sarfati, rightly reported on this earlier today. He said, look, in Syria and Iraq, those militias are in a state of war, striking the U.S. on a regular basis, daily, hourly even. So as much as the Biden administration wants to avoid that, it's upon them. Now, what will they do in 2024? Israel reportedly did not give the U.S. a heads up before eliminating Saleh Al-Arouri. And already we see the White House releasing a statement distancing itself from the strike, the elimination of Al-Arouri. So concerned, so worried about offending the Iranian regime. Why? Because this administration in Washington, D.C., ultimately, folks, is still clinging to the grand hope of a grand bargain with the Iranian regime. They still, despite everything we've seen, despite October 7th, Hezbollah activated, Iran targeting U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq, this administration still would, in a heartbeat, sign a new nuclear deal with the Iranian regime, no doubt. And that's a sad fact and a sad commentary as we move into 2024. I don't believe Israel, however, will be as conciliatory, let's just say, towards the Iranian regime and its proxies. So fasten your seatbelts. 2024 will be rather eventful. And mark that down as the understatement of the year so far on January 2nd. In all seriousness, folks, we're heading into some uncharted waters for sure. I don't see how Israel and Hezbollah avoid a major, major conflict to the north. Could this be the year of the Great Northern War? It's a war that Israel doesn't want, clearly, but which Israel has had thrust upon it because of Hezbollah's activity and Iran's activity. I can't see any situation where after the dust settles, and it will take many months, but when the dust somewhat settles in Gaza, that the situation in Lebanon is still the same. Now, Israeli official and Israeli military spokesman said last week that the situation's already been changed for good along the Israel-Lebanon border, that Hezbollah has already taken major losses and been pushed back, but not to the degree, folks, that it needs to be. So we shall see the response to the Al-Arouri elimination and much more tomorrow, and it's going to be a very busy week. One thing to end with, January 3rd, 2020, 4 years ago, almost to the day, the U.S. eliminated Iranian terror master Qasem Soleimani. 4 years later, almost to the day, his good friend Saleh Al-Arouri has now been eliminated. Very interesting. Thanks so much for joining us here today on our very first Watchman Newscast live stream for 2024. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.